Great. So, welcome. My name is Carl Dakin, and this is our Meetup group on Opportunity Zones. This is our third event in this program. And what we're doing is every other program, we're going to try to bring everybody up to date. And we're going to try to bring everybody up to date on a fast-moving piece of information, which is Opportunity Zones. Because things are changing all the time, and that's what we're going to get into tonight. So you've got more information and up-to-date information. Then on alternating sessions, we're going to take a project and we're going to do a deep dive, granular analysis, brainstorming of that, and walk through the process of how this project comes together, why it's there, what needs to be done in order to conform to meet all the tax incentives that are available to investors and provide a new source of capital to an individual business property or to a larger scale, a particular community. And so we'll be working our way through that. Each time we're going to record the session and we're going to broadcast some of them, although we're not broadcasting tonight. And these will be posted up online. So if you can't make a meetup, you can go and grab that and pull it down and watch it. And if you have somebody that you would like to show it to, it's all will be online. If you go onto our Meetup page, there will be a point where you can see all the links, all the things we've put into there, and I'll give you that contact information at the end of the program. So I'm Carl Dakin, and I basically work with businesses and organizations of all shapes, sizes, and economic development projects and raising capital, strategy development, and the like. And I've been doing a lot of work over the last several years with investment crowdfunding to make accessible capital from ordinary people, non-accredited investors, to Main Street businesses. And that work basically positioned me to be in a point where when the Opportunity Zone was announced, I had a very good understanding of what it could be and what was necessary to implement it. And because the projects I work with, both the ones I personally lead and my clients, it made sense for me to go ahead and form this group and start sharing information as quickly and broadly as possible. And my background is working with high-tech companies primarily, but a lot of local and particularly rural economic development projects, a number of social enterprises, and I commonly deal with what we call alternative capital, which means we're not dealing with an angel or a VC or a bank, but other sources of money or non-monetary sources of capital to help move a business forward from start or to grow it up. If you want to read more about me or learn more about me, my LinkedIn site is a good place to start on that. But we'll move on from there. Then Invest Local is a company in which one of my hats is one of the 2 registered intermediary platforms in the state of Colorado that allows you to do investment crowdfunding at the state level. We've been in existence since late in 2015. And have been working continuously to make this source of capital, non-accredited investors, available to anybody who needs to raise money, but in particular Main Street businesses who would ordinarily not qualify for institutional money because they want to keep and hold their businesses, or because their margin might be thin enough that it's not that attractive to somebody seeking a high ROI. So there we do a lot of focusing on other benefits of the investment, impact style investing, and working with the communities to make that happen. Invest Local is acting as the sponsor of tonight's program and will also be one of the sponsors of the conference on November 16th. And we also are creating on their website a library of all the information we can find on Opportunity Zones. And we're kind of coming at it from a different standpoint, more as a practitioner rather than as an economic developer. So what we're going to do in this effort is we're going to try to share information. We are going to look at case studies. So we can talk about it at a 50,000, 30,000 foot level, but unless we drill down to specific cases, you really won't see a lot of the issues that are there. And even in a single project, how you structure it may make a huge difference on whether you can attract investors in, whether you're going to get the ROI you want to, or achieve whatever objective you're trying to do. So what we're doing now is we're inviting people who have a live project to come to us. We're going to try to help them gather all the information about that project. We're going to probably do a video documentary of the principals and the different players, get all the funding documents and interrelated contracts together, and then create a instruction guide and put this out as a catalog so that anyone in an open share, open source approach can say, I want to do this. Here's an example of something I want to do. And you've got a good start to start planning that particular activity. Now, along the way, there are a lot of issues. And there are more issues with this than normal because this is new and they're not finished figuring out all the rules that are going to apply to this. So this was started with the tax bill in December of last year. So you could do an opportunity zone funding since January 1st. But there are no rules currently in place from the IRS to govern these transactions. The good news is that they just published proposed rules, which will probably take place in January. So you have some guidelines now to work with, and they issued one ruling to interpret one of the questions that kept coming forward about your ability to invest in a property with both land and a building and how you allocate your money. But we're collecting issues, and what we're going to do is publish these on the website. We're going to invite any expert who has an answer to create an answer solution for that and post that up side by side, and we're going to continue to build this repository of information so that we keep knocking down issues as they come up. And we anticipate that as we get into this, we'll have more answers than we have questions, but there'll always be a few along the way. So this is the principal way we're doing this program: sharing, case studies, and issues. So to begin with, this is some of the big news. We've been kind of flying blind for months and months and months, and knowing that the IRS was charged with the responsibility of promulgating rules for implementing the tax statute, and they had done nothing more than publish a frequently asked questions thing on their website, which was not very helpful. But they finally got around and they put out this press release which basically explains this, and it talks about all the potential, and it basically gets down to that opportunity zones are economically distressed areas. It's good for the country, it's good for the local economy if people invest into these areas, and the good news is in this case it is a major incentive for people to invest, to get them to consider investing here instead of somewhere else. And it's fairly loose, meaning that there aren't a whole bunch of prohibitions and other things that commonly wouldn't cause anybody to do anything new or different. But there are 126 areas designated in Colorado. There are 8,700 across the United States in the 50 states and the territories. So don't leave Puerto Rico off your list of places that you may want to do a project. And as long as you're working within an opportunity zone, as a business, you can do something in any of the other opportunity zones anywhere that they may exist. So you're not limited to a single state. You can have a multi-state project, including the territories as you go out. So the IRS released their regulations. They're 74 pages in length. They read like a lot of federal regulations, where a lot of it is trying to explain what they're doing without actually being a regulation. And I'm still studying these to try to make sure that I understand what's here and what issues might be there. They've answered a few of the obvious questions that have come up on length of investment and so forth. But if you want some dry reading, this is what it looks like. And but it's intended to guide everybody going forward. So classically what happens in our government rules of this sort is they have to publish them, which they've done. They have to go through a public feedback loop, which will take typically 8 weeks. And then after that, they may make some revisions or changes, and then at that point they're adopted and they become the operating standards for what you're trying to do. Then they had one revenue ruling already where somebody was saying if I buy, as I say, property with both land and a building, you're required to, under this law, if you buy property, you have to spend as much enhancing that property as you do in the cost of acquisition of that property. They don't want you land banking it, basically making a non-economic gesture by buying land and doing nothing with it. They want something to happen within the community that generates jobs and generates taxes to the local community. So you have to invest up. The question was, well, if it has both land and a building, if I put all the money into the building, do I have to do anything with the land? And the answer was no. It was a pretty rational, reasonable type of explanation, but it helped clarify questions for people who were unclear on that. These are all available. They'll be posted up in the library, haven't been posted yet. There was an email sent out on the Meetup group, which has these links in it, and so you can find them both on the Meetup group and in the Invest Local library at this time. So any questions at this point about this, or do I need to go back for somebody who's just getting started on this and would like to ask even more basic questions? Yes?
Do you have to start with gains? Or, I mean, I know that's a good tax incentive, but also if you have money just to invest and your goal is to have that project obviously become something that's going to have gains in it.
Yeah, so the way it's structured is that the only thing that will qualify for the tax incentives are the rolled over capital gains. Okay. So if you had, for example, a project, say you sold property that you had $100,000 basis in, and it sold for $200,000. You have $100,000 of capital gains, and you have $100,000 recapture of your original investment. Mm-hmm. For tax purposes, you can roll the capital gains over into this investment, and it can qualify for all these benefits that are attributed to this project. If you invest the other $100,000 into the same property, it can be made as an investment, but it does not get the same kind of a capital tax benefits that your rollover did. Say that you invest the full $200,000 into a piece of property, and at the end of 10 years, where the maximum benefits of this legislation accrue, it sells for $400,000. So on the $100,000 of capital rollover, you made another $100,000 of gain. That's tax-free. The $100,000 that you put in would still be taxed at capital gains rates, 30% or whatever it is on that particular day. So you can mix and match here, but you typically will make the investment of the non-rollover to the side rather than going through one of these funds that has to be created, so it doesn't complicate the bookkeeping for what's going on. So, and I'll step back and explain that just to make sure everybody's clear. The way they set up the statute is you can only invest cash. You cannot invest property or any in-kind. It's got to be a cash investment. And that investment has to go into a newly created entity called an Opportunity Zone Fund. It serves as a pass-through vehicle and also a reporting vehicle for the IRS. So the IRS knows who put money into a fund, which is reported through the fund, and it also knows that the money's been deployed out of the fund into appropriate investments that qualify under the statute. Then if it's 10 years, all that fund is going to do is publish to the IRS twice a year reports. This is what we did. We didn't do anything for 6 months. Or if you're doing rollovers of activities, it's going to have to report that. So they know that you have a reason to continue the deferral of the capital gains tax on your original investment until 2026, which time you have to pay that, and that you've met the requirement for the maximum waiver of the gain on the new investment. At that point, then, that has to be liquidated in order for you to get your cash back and to get the maximum benefit of what you're doing. You don't have to do it in 10 years. I think they pushed it out to 2048 or something like that as the back end on when you have to finally sell out of one of these types of investments. So this entity is created. You would roll your capital gains into that entity, and then if this entity can be created as what we call a captive or dedicated fund, meaning that you helped create it to make sure the money went where you wanted it to go. There's no problem with you holding interest in the fund, and you use it simply, as I say, as a pass-through vehicle to meet the requirements of the statute. Then if you're buying property, you would put in the $200,000 this way, and then you would match it with $100,000 that would come into the same property from two directions. The question is what happens to your investment if it's generating profits over the life of the investment? So if it's a restaurant, and ordinarily they're going to have end of year either 1120 income for a corporation, or it's 1065 income for a partnership, that income will be taxed at its ordinary level. It's your investment in that that's held in the underlying equity in that entity that is carried for that period of time, and when that's sold, that gain is there. Okay, so this creates a bunch of questions, and it's the issue we're going to talk about a little bit later, because you may find a project where you invest in it and there's no event whatsoever that's taxable till after the 10-year time period is over. And for maximum upside potential, that may be what you want to look at. You'll have other businesses where you're trying to roll over the money, and so there's automatically going to be profits generated every time there's a transaction or a rollover of property, and that's taxed in the standard fashion. But your ownership rights in that entity that gets to that point is going to be the one that gains the benefit from the tax waiver.
Let me pursue that just a little bit further.
Sure.
Suppose you generated $100,000 worth of profit in this same example. Can you take that same it's gotta be, I was gonna say, could you take that $100,000 and put that in another investment in another location in an opportunity zone? Or does it have to be stuff, either land that's sold? You see what I'm saying?
I think so. So let me restate the question. So if you make an investment that basically amounts to be a shorter term for a project. So you invest in a project and you cash out of that project, do you need to roll that?
No, I'm not saying that. Okay. I'm saying you still keep that money in restaurant A. You've made profits in restaurant A of $100,000. Okay. Can you take that $100,000 in profits, and rather than reporting it as you normally would for tax purposes, reinvest it into another property?
Okay, so let's take a hypothetical.
Okay.
You make a $100,000 opportunity zone investment in a restaurant. Okay, through the operation of the restaurant, it generates another $100,000 of profits.
Correct.
Okay, the question is, can you take the profits generated by that restaurant and roll them into another opportunity zone investment?
Yes.
And the answer is no. And that's because there's not a capital gain taking place. That's ordinary profits accruing to a business in its normal operation. So in that case, it would not work. Now, let's take another example, though, that might fit your situation. So let's say, for example, you put the money into a business that is doing retail fix and flips, okay? And you buy a piece of property, you let it sit for a period of 1 year, so you have a capital gain that you would recognize off of that upon sale, and then you roll it over, okay, at that point in time. So you liquidate the entire property you've acquired and you put it into another property. In that case, you would have a second capital gain that is there. The question then becomes, do you have to invest it back into that area or not? And the rule would be yes, you would have to invest that back into that, because the business in which you invested, which is rolling the properties over, is an opportunity zone business, and it must do its business within the zone.
So then it's actually possible to buy a series of properties in an opportunity zone, instead of declaring a 1031, just reinvest it into another property in that same zone, continuing to build up your capital gains. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, so again, the question is, if you're going to start a business that's involved in purchasing and reselling property, one of your options would be to buy the initial property and then upon its sale to use a 1031 exchange to roll that property over so there's no tax recognized on the increasing appreciation from property to property during that time frame. That would, and my understanding is that would be correct, as long as you remain in an opportunity zone area. Okay, because you're meeting the requirements of the statute. You invested in a business, the money remains in the business, you have profits coming out, but because of other tax laws, which you can stack up, you can roll those profits over in a way so that you don't have to come out of the property till the end of the 10 years, at which time you would be able to get the maximum tax benefit without giving up ordinary taxes or short-term taxes in the middle. Okay. Yes?
If you're going to touch on this later, it can certainly wait, but do you have to invest in real estate, or could you invest in a business or an entity that's operating in an opportunity zone, or what are the restrictions around?
Yeah, so the question is, can you invest in a business or in a property? And the answer is yes, you can invest in both. We're probably going to see a lot of people investing in property because there may be ways in which to do that where there is a greater chance for gain with lease taxes coming off of this during the course of the holding period. Also because investors may be looking for something that appears more secure, something that has enough collateral behind it that there's less likelihood that you have a downside to the investment. But you can also make an investment in a business. And from a business standpoint, you get some advantages. You have time after you invest in the business for that business then to turn around and use that money on behalf of the business, where if you invest directly into a property, you're supposed to make the full amount of the investment within the 6-month time period in which you made the investment. And so what we're seeing is, and this is one of the things I've got to review in the rules, the way it works is the fund has to report twice a year that it got money in and it deployed that money into a proper investment. It's done twice a year, June 30th and December 31st. If the investment comes in on December 1st, by the way it's structured right now, you're supposed to move that money in 30 days in order for it not to have a hiccup and come backward through the system. If you invest in a business, the business has a broader range of discretion how it puts that money to work because you've invested in the business and it's not got that same short clock that you're seeing with the properties. So you may, if you're going to do property enhancement, you may still want to look at putting it into a business first and then making sure that everything fits as far as the properties in which it's investing as its normal activity. Okay? Yes, Tom?
Are the rules and regulations that they're clearly still working out, are they substantial changes? And at what point will it stop?
Yeah, so the question is, are the proposed rules substantially the same as they may be when they're finalized? There's no way to know at this point in time whether these rules are going to have little or minor changes over time, but they spent a lot of time and energy to get them to this point. And my guess would be that these will be largely the same things you're going to see approved going down the road. And if there are changes made, they'll typically be to clarify something that everybody kind of thinks is what it should be, but it isn't spelled out in the rules, and somebody wants that clarity before they put a lot of money into a specific investment. And that's, if they can't get the clarity they want, they can apply for a ruling, which is go to the IRS in an administrative hearing and say, how would this work in this particular situation? Okay? Other questions?
At the end of 10 years, if you don't want to get out of this asset or business that you have generated and created really good returns on, can you, as opposed to divesting and returning all the capital and whatever profits may have been generated, can you just return a return on investment and say, I've accrued a 15% ROI on this business, I return all that ROI to the investor, they now have tax deferred some sort of, or do you have to get out of the business and return all that to the opportunity fund in order to, or can you continue to maintain that business if it's a great business and everybody's making money, everybody is happy? How do you maintain that if that's not exit at that time?
Right, so the question is, when do you need to come out of an opportunity zone investment? And the proposed rules, which are discussed here, now talk about having out to maybe 2048 before you're forced to exit and recognize any gains that are there. So this can't become an infinite, perpetual type of investment, and there will have to be a date where you recognize the gains, so that caps the amount of tax waiver that would occur. Now, you can come out anytime you want to before that time, and depending upon when you come out, what it does to the amount of tax benefits you're going to derive. You can invest in an opportunity zone investment today and cash out next year, and you've accomplished it. Nothing else. You get to defer your taxes on your original gain for 1 year into 2020. You have to hold it there for a period of time in order to get the greater benefit of waiver of income on the investment of 5, 7, or 10 years. But as I now understand it, that if you leave it in there beyond 10 years, there's no problem with that from the IRS standpoint. Now, your investors, when you go out and raise the capital, you typically are going to give them a time frame for when they can expect a cash exit. And you're going to need to honor that commitment to them or get them to consent to continuing on without an exit taking place.
Can there be a portional exit, like back to what he was saying, say, you know, you find this great piece of land, you develop a business on it, it's doing great, and can an investor leave? Can some investors leave? And I mean, I would assume that you could then take over the business and not have these type of benefits.
Right, so the question is, can you have a partial exit rather than a full exit, or a staged exit, or any number of other ways rather than a complete cutoff? And my understanding is yes, that is possible. You have to remember again that the exit is coming from the fund, not from the underlying business. Okay, and one of the things we've been exploring is for the business to act as the buyout agent for everybody in the fund. It could be an automatic thing occurring from day one, or it could be an event where they create a reserve or sinking fund that has enough cash in it to assure by the time they hit a certain date. And the business may even have preset that value in order to hopefully gain the advantage of their appreciation being greater than what they did. There's a number of investment vehicles for startup businesses that use what we call kicking the can down the road pricing. And this would be an example of that, where you go, the business says, I need money, I need to raise $1 million. I'll buy you out at $1.5 million at the end of 10 years, and then their internal goal is to be worth more than $1.5 million and take everybody out at that time. The people get the advantage that that increase in value is tax-free at the end of 10 years, but they only made $500,000 because that was the purchase price, and the rest of it stays in the business is ongoing. So you have to keep in mind that there is the fund and the underlying investment, and there's different vehicles for getting in and out of that. Okay, that was a nice short description, my first slide. At this point, we may get done by midnight, so I'm going to move to the next slide. I'm announcing that, to my understanding, the first Opportunity Zone funding has occurred here in Colorado. The fund called Rural COZ, which is run and operated by 4 Points Funding, which is an angel investment broker dealer firm out of Steamboat Springs, raised an amount of money, and part of that money went into buying a property in Delta County, Colorado, and their focus is on impact and rural communities on the western slope. So if you are looking to raise money into a project and you're rural and you're impactful and you're on the western slope, that might be somebody that you would want to talk to. But they have a pretty good sized fund. They shared this information at the Economic Development Council of Colorado annual conference in Estes Park last week, and they are looking for new projects. Sean, who is one of the principals in the company, is doing the grand tour of every city over 5,000 population in western Colorado, but he may be one of the investor profiles we show at the conference on November the 16th. So again, these slides will be available to you. They'll be posted up online, so don't worry about too much about anything that's up here. You'll get a copy of all that. But this is one of the first ones. Now, I'm working with Venetia Dutra, who is going to, has set up an Opportunity Zone Fund. It's unfunded at the moment, but the vehicle has been created as an entity. And her goal is to create a series of fix and flip, or we're calling them or residential rejuvenation properties for communities of color. And she's going to start in Houston, Texas, in the 3rd Ward. The money will be invested. She's going to raise money at a crowdfunding level from the local community, which means the money comes in and stays local. Then she's going to set up a management company which will do all the operations of this local company, and she is going to bring Opportunity Zone funds into that management company so she can replicate this across cities across the United States. So the fund has been created, but we haven't done the funding of the fund as of yet, and so a fund without money is essentially that. It's a shell. But they're in the process right now of buying properties in Houston and looking at 3 other cities across the United States. And the intent is to buy a building and sell it back to someone in the community so there's no gentrification taking place, and it adds value to a community, and then the profits are split across the board. One of the interesting things about that project, which may be featured at our next meetup, is that she has set it up so she will be the seller without use of a broker dealer on her side of the equation. She's going to take the 3% that she would earn on her side, and it's going to be applied to a down payment on the house of those people who invested in her fund in the local community. And then in addition, if they work on the rejuvenation of the house, they move to the front of the line in terms of purchasing that particular house. So she's orchestrating a number of community benefits by doing it in this fashion and bringing money from the outside into the community at multiple levels to improve the wealth and quality of those communities. So it's a very interesting project along that line. But things are in motion. I am talking with people now across the state of Colorado in multiple states about different types of projects, and they're all over the board. Real estate is involved in almost all of them at this point, but it may be to do housing, it may be to create jobs, it may be for some other primary objective, but land is there because I think it's just going to be a common element to most of this. But it doesn't have to be. Yes?
With the properties that are in opportunity zones, you have your purchase price, say it's $100,000, keep it simple. So any property anywhere in the opportunity zone, in order to stay compliant with the regulations, you have to put 100% of your purchase price into that over the 10 years?
Yeah, so the question is, regardless of the type of property you require, you have to enhance it by at least the purchase price of the property.
There's always that risk in 10 years that you haven't, you're not going to recognize that. I mean, so then now I have a property that's $200,000, but maybe the market will only bear $130,000.
So yeah, so the follow-on question, there's always a risk that your appreciation of property will not come to the level of your investment. We're looking at several models along the way, and if you buy a high-end property that's fully rented and is at max price today at the top of the Denver market, that may not be a great choice over the long haul. Now, over 10 years, you may have a chance for the economy to slide and bounce back as it did before. If you had a perfect crystal ball, you would let the economy slide and you go in and buy everything cheap, and then you're going to get all kinds of upside potential. And if you have that crystal ball, please talk to me afterwards, because I could use one on our projects. The question is will this potentially involve agriculture? One of the best ways to get a good handle on that is to look at the 126 opportunity zones that are in the state of Colorado. They're in economically distressed areas, and 60% of these projects are in rural communities. So whether they're impacting city center in a town of 2,000 people, which means it's also impacting the county and everybody in a 5-county area, or it's actually in a rural area, a standalone outside of city limits, there's going to be a rural impact in there somewhere. As far as what could these kind of projects look like, again, at the conference that was held last week, the question was raised was, can we do a new oil fracking project out in the middle of an opportunity zone? And the answer was yes, you could. There's nothing to stop somebody from doubling down on the tax benefits of this and also doing something that you might have planned to do already. Where we see probably the largest impact is going to be on jobs generation in a community where you got a project that's going to create a brand new job that they talk about average median income. So they're hoping to get new jobs above the average and build up enough of those to give this continuity or to revitalize a rural area. But any kind of rural project would work if it's in one of these zones. So if you look across the map of Colorado, there's huge areas that are in opportunity zones that include the entire Crowley County, which is one of the counties I'm looking at doing a project in. And in some cases, because of the nature of how districts were done, half the county's in and half the county's not. So you get into some situations where you may be on the wrong side of the street, and there's really nothing much you can do about it. The opportunity zones were proposed by each of the individual states and ratified by the IRS, and they're considered, for most purposes, to be locked at least for several years, with no likelihood that they're going to change these zones or add new territories to this. So it is what it is. And but as far as projects go, anything that's rural and outdoors, which could be anything from a wind farm, drilling or fracking a well, putting in a new type of crop. If hemp becomes legal at the federal level, it would not fall under the prohibited activities. There's a short list of things you can't do, and they call them sin businesses, which are casinos and massage parlors and things of that nature, and anything else that's illegal. So for the moment, at the federal level, you can't do hemp if you use the strictest interpretation of this. If the Farm Bill passes, which is now past due, but hopefully after the election it'll go forward and hemp becomes legal, then you could do hemp farming in these communities or any other type of crop. So it's wide open. That's what I really do like about this is there wasn't a long list of things you can't do or strange things or hoops you have to jump through in order to make this work. It's a very short list. It won't work for everything, but the number of opportunities it opens up is great. So new projects and planning. I just started to create a list. These are ones I know are being talked about in the public. There's about another 24 that I can't talk about yet because they're not public yet. But Avalon, Colorado is this project out near the Gaylord, near DIA. It's a 283-acre mixed-use proposed project. And we're going to try to feature this project along with a couple others at the conference on the 16th. In that case, Ryan will be doing an 8-minute presentation giving a general overview of what this is all about. But when you get into a project of this size and scale, keep in mind this is not it's not likely to be a single opportunity zone fund. It's that you may do one for infrastructure, you might do one for a building, you might do one for a business that sits in a building. There's several ways you can slice and dice this. This could easily be 40, 50, or 100 different opportunity zone style investments, depending upon how the thing unfolds. And we've looked at, a business that's sitting outside an opportunity zone can create a subsidiary and put it in an opportunity zone so that it qualifies for this funding for the subsidiary, or that you can mix and match this to split the property from the building, from the operation of the business. These are all possible candidates. The other one is Powderhorn Ski Area in the Sunday Denver Post. One of the Gart brothers who own that particular ski area announced that they had engaged the management of their ski area to look into opportunity zone funding. No plan or direction or dollar amount has been defined, but it is open to small projects and huge projects in size if you can recruit enough money into the project to make it work. conversations that are going on, particularly at the community level, is anything that's a challenge to the community. Can we do something with local food? Can we do something in transportation? Can we create new jobs? Can we put in a skill training program? Can we put in a new shuttle? All these things are candidates in those communities. And what these communities see is that this tax incentive may be big enough, strong enough, bold enough to be like the last dollar that's needed to create the puzzle and make all this come together. And so there's high interest that's growing geometrically day by day about the potential of this, but you still have the common challenges to raising money. And if you're raising money from people you don't know, you're going to have to overcome that challenge. And the fact that all these communities, 8,700 areas with potentially 500,000 opportunity zone projects, may all be competing for money, you have to remember when you're raising the money that you have to be better than the person that is also raising money, or you have to differentiate yourself to attract that funding to your specific project. Other questions on this area? Okay. Then this is an interesting thing. If you're working with a particular community, the state of Colorado has authorized the Department of Local Affairs to provide grant funding to communities to help plan and qualify candidates for funding within their communities. The maximum grant is $25,000. It can only be made to a government entity. So there's a variety of offices within a county or a city, or certain types of districts would qualify for that. You have to match it dollar for dollar. So for every dollar you seek in a grant, you have to put up money from outside, from another source. And then what they want you to do is create a prospectus that includes multiple projects in that community that showcases the entirety of the community, so that it makes it a bigger target to receive money into that community. So if you do a single project and you're doing it by yourself with your own budget, you may or may not be seen by the different investors you're trying to gain the attention of. But if you do it as part of a larger master plan or complementary plan, and it gets into the prospectus, then it's going to be visible at that community. The state of Colorado will be publishing all these prospectuses on their opportunity zone page, so you get additional publicity that way, and it makes your project stronger if there is this multi-party complementary effect. It makes it more complicated. It may slow it down, but it still will make it more attractive to someone who's concerned that a project by itself may not be strong enough to do what you want it to do. This is a PDF that explains all the criteria, but it's a fairly straightforward. We need money to build a prospectus that's going to showcase this, and it's submitted by the local government agency. And as long as they know that the money is present, then right now we've not seen any limitations on how many of these things that they may fund. But if you're looking into a community, this may be part of the way to cover part of your cost of planning. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we're having a conference on the 16th, which is a week from Friday. This will go from 9 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon. The morning is going to be general information like I've shared here today on what opportunity zones and how they work. Then we're going to get into why investors would invest, and getting into the head and mindset of why anybody would put money in and when they may put money into a project. We're going to shift there to the examples of different projects that are in motion to start getting a flavor for what's there. Then we're going to have a panel discussion on all the tools that are available to a community, such as the DOLA grant and other tools. A lot of them are on the Colorado website to help people in communities put together their prospectuses and get something going. And then we're going to break out for the afternoon, where we're going to offer communities the chance to grab a round table, sit down with other members of their community, and talk to each other about forming a group, action team, or somebody to get something started and start putting things together, or just simply introducing themselves to each other and thinking how they might be able to work collectively better than working individually. So at the end of the day, 3:30, all these groups will report back all these projects that are in motion may be ultimately come into a prospectus and be posted where you can see them. We will be recording. Steve and I will be working. Steve will be doing the hard work. He's going to be doing the recording. And this will be broadcast live across the United States, but I'm focused on Colorado. And if you happen to be from out of town and can't come to the conference, but would like to host a remote viewing site as a chamber, professional, entrepreneur, or other association, contact me and we'll give you the link and the instructions to set up a site. And you can invite in your friends or your partners or whoever you want to into a private boardroom or into a public community center, and you can watch the first 3.5 hours of this conference live on that day. Again, we're going to record it. In this case, because of the length, we'll break it into pieces, but it'll all go up on the internet. So if you can't make the conference, then you'll still have the ability to see what we present on that particular date. Any questions on the conference? Okay, this is the conference that we put together in basically 7 weeks so far. This is not what we call rational good planning on putting a conference together, but we feel that we wanted to make all the communities aware as soon as possible about opportunity zones. Part of that is because if the economy should have a massive correction in the stock market, which we've seen some indicators that might occur and might occur soon, people will sell off their stock and they'll be looking for another investment. If the community isn't ready to receive that investment, this may be an opportunity they will not see for a number of years. And so our goal is to get as many people as ready as possible, as soon as possible, all across the state of Colorado, so as much of that money can come into these communities. And so we're kind of scrambling to get this up now, and it's kind of a rough and ready type of conference. The state is doing programs around the state. There'll be more conferences coming forward on opportunity zones. The only one that's currently on the agenda is in March of next year. That'll be run by the Impact Initiative. Stephanie Gripney and her group will be putting on that conference on March 11th. By that time, there may be no change in our economy, or we may be on the other side of the hill and all running downhill very fast at that point, scrambling to get everything put together. But this is free, and it's live, and it is also going to be recorded. So you'll have multiple ways of getting that information. Again, as I mentioned, part of our goal post-conference is to start collecting in different flavors of community projects, which may serve as templates or do-it-yourself kits for the community. We're going to do a deep dive on those by doing videos of all the people and why they got together. We're going to try to get all the documents from the funding to the deployment and the interconnection of all the different parties, and then provide some instruction that will give people a better starting point to say, this looks good, this looks doable, I can do this in my community, and come back and make that happen. Sooner, better, faster is the rule for everything. So we'll be working on that as soon as the conference is over. So that's what I just said, and this is a great slide that explains what I just said. So this is what happens when you finish your slide deck after 10 o'clock at night. Yeah, case studies. What we have seen is that most of these projects have a certain level of complexity due to the number of people involved, the different agendas, different types of money. We may be looking at capital stacks with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 flavors of money coming together to make them work best, and people working on different time frames. So getting a community organized and moving is hard. Individual projects are hard enough, but communities are going to be more difficult. We think that the case study approach is the way to get best bang for the buck in the shortest period of time. Issues, I mentioned this earlier. Along the way, we're going to keep identifying questions like the ones you have raised. In some cases, we may have a complete, clear answer to your question, and we'll give it to you as soon as possible. In some cases, you may ask a question, we go, that's a really good question, and I don't mean it just to say it. It's a really good question, but we don't have an answer for you today. So anytime that we hear a question like this, we go back to the website, we'll post up the question, and then we're going to search out an expert who can give us that answer. Or if there's enough people asking the same question, we might even collectively ask the IRS for a ruling to give us clarification on that. We're going to continue to collect questions as we work our way through this. There's been a bunch of interesting questions. We have a list of like 40-some questions, and we're slowly working through that, but we're adding more questions every day because people come up with a project and you go, didn't think of that. How would that twist under this rule? Let's see what we're going to do. So we are going to try to answer everybody's questions as soon as possible. If it's not immediately available, we'll try to get to it soon. So the question that Rick asked earlier, and this is part of the thing, which business structure, corporation or limited liability company, will enable an investor to gain the most tax incentives? And the answer is, it depends. It depends if you're investing in a business or if you're investing in a property. If you're rolling over the business, how the business generates profits. So there's a variety of factors that get into this, and we won't be able to give you a one-size-fits-all to this. What right now is generally, and it's a general guidance for the moment until we get some better numbers, is we're suggesting that you may want to consider the Opportunity Zone Fund as being a public benefit corporation. So it's taxed as a corporation, and it's carrying the positive elements of being a public benefit corporation. It's largely, as I indicated earlier, is a pass-through vehicle. It is not intended, doesn't have to be doing anything more than reporting to the IRS. Now, you do have an option to make it in a more proactive business structure. So if you're investing directly from the fund into a series of properties with no intermediary business, then this fund may be a full tilt operating type of company. And in that case, you may not want to choose a corporate structure, or and you may want to go to some other structure that you think is more appropriate for what you're doing. But there are so many variables right now that there is no clear indication that what's going to go on. As you're trying to attract investors, you will need to consider the structure to determine whether any structure is going to be more attractive or less attractive to investors based upon their particular goals.
I'm sorry, you said it was a public what?
Public benefit corporation. So many of you may have heard of B Corps. That's actually a kind of a third-party nonprofit status for companies that do good people, planet, profit. We in Colorado adopted into our corporate code the PBC with a lower standard so that more social enterprises would qualify for the benefit of using that designation. So the B Corp is up here. It's high-end, a little bit of everything, and our standard at the state is much lower in order to use this particular vehicle. The question is, would it make sense for your organization, Colorado Enterprise Fund, or a nonprofit, another nonprofit, to locate within an opportunity zone? There may be reasons to do that that are secondary to the tax incentives, because you're being a nonprofit, are you going to be recognizing capital gains? Okay, there's, I can't invest in you as a nonprofit. I can't hold a private equity interest in you, so I have no reason to invest in you directly. Okay, and I'm not sure you're going to get anything out of that. Now, as a nonprofit with a mission that includes community development, which yours does, it may make sense for you to be in the zone, but it's a proximity thing. I don't see any specific benefit that comes from that. If you're going to do a project, you may want to frame that project as an entity and make sure it's in the zone so it can get the benefit and it can attract the investment that you're looking for. But aside from that, I'm going to say for the moment, I don't see a reason for a nonprofit necessarily to locate into a zone. Now, if you're in a zone, 90% of your money is supposed to be deployed within the zone, which is a broad gray statement definition of what that means. They don't want you setting up a company in a zone, and then the money going out of it and investing outside the zone, like buying property that's in a non-opportunity zone. They assume that if you're making something, you're hiring people, and you're doing things, and you're doing things inside the zone, your customers and clients don't have to be in the zone, your business is in the zone. So this will be a point where we'll get into gray areas from time to time where somebody goes, are you really inside a zone doing business in a zone? And some people may push that limit a little too far and put at risk the tax benefits that are there. But it'll be an ongoing question. Well, I'm sure this is an area where we're going to see a lot of interesting questions come up. But we've got a company that we're not in an opportunity zone now. If we move into a zone, then we got to make sure 90% of all the money we raise of this nature goes into zones, which is not a bad thing, but it may not be doable. It may be impractical. If we stay inside the 90% rule, then we can do 90% of our projects in zone, 10% out. So there is a little flex in there, but not a whole lot. And you also have to allow for the fund to cover its costs during this duration so that you at least have what we call minimum staffing to make your reports and verify that everybody's in compliance. So this is basically sources for you. Right here is the Meetup group. This is what you're at, is one of our events. If you're not a member of our group, feel free to join. It's free. And our goal is to try to meet twice a month, once on an update, once on deep dive case studies. And we'll continue that as long as it makes sense to do that.
What's your case study next?
The next one, I believe, is, it's not today's the 6th. I think it's around the 20th. I'll have to check the calendar because, quite frankly, anything on the other side of the 16th is invisible to me at the moment. I can't see beyond that Friday for some reason. This is the library we've set up at investlocalcolorado.com. We have a variety of pages all dedicated to opportunity zones. We're putting in papers and articles, putting in the case studies as they come up. We'll be putting in links to all the videos that we're creating, and we're creating our issues list, and we're going to keep building on this. We've been trying to identify other sites who are collecting information, and we found a couple that we think are ahead of us in terms of general information, but we're coming at it from a slightly different direction. So we're going to have some stuff that they won't have and vice versa. Then the state of Colorado, this is their website, and they're continuing to create a whole lot of opportunities and resources. They're very community focused, but they've offered to put up anybody who's raising capital for an opportunity zone to list them as a project. Now, I will tell you that everything we've talked about so far with opportunity zones still has to conform with securities regulations and laws at both the federal and state level. So if you're doing a private raise of opportunity zone money, you shouldn't technically be posted in any public place because it would violate the private nature of your offering. If you are a public investment crowdfunding campaign under federal law or state law, then there's no problem with your project being posted here. But a lot of people have overlooked, or another way of putting it is they haven't quite got to that problem yet in thinking through this entire process, is that you still have to get people to put money into the fund. If you're going to people you don't know, you're probably engaged in sale of securities, and it's going to be necessary for you to comply with securities laws along the way. This is my email, my phone number. If you want to contact me, I'll be happy to refer you to any resource that's out there or point you to somebody who may be able to help you, which may be myself, or it may be somebody else. We're trying to identify people who understand the whole thing. It's become obvious, as Janet Persky with the state said, there aren't a whole lot of people who know everything that needs to be done to get all this together. They'll know a piece of it. So we anticipate lots of teams coming together for this. We see the audiences, if you think about it from a crowd perspective, we're going to have investors who are making investments. We're going to have people who are managing opportunity zone funds. So this may be a separate service aside from everything else that's going on. For some of you who don't want to run a fund or don't know how to run a fund, they may provide this as a service, and one of my companies is going to contend in that area. We're talking about investment advisors who are maybe the most influential people standing between investors and these opportunity zone funds. Because if an investment advisor doesn't know about it and doesn't recommend it, it's hard for people to override that influence and put money into something they've never heard about. And I'll tell you right now, a lot of the investment advisors don't know about this. Those in the impact area are probably further down the path than anybody else. But right now, this is one of the challenges we're going to face. Then we're going to have the people who are trying to receive money. That may be a community, may be a business or a property developer of some kind. And then we're going to have the service providers. These are the people who are going to help make all these things come together if it turns out that whoever is putting the project together doesn't have the full range of skills that they're looking for. So different groups will have different reasons to be interested in this, either to move a property, buy a property, make a community project happen. And then there's enough people in here along the way who are going to be looking for fees, for good or for bad, to help either approve, influence, or make it happen. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, that brings me to the end of tonight's update. So thank you all for coming. I'm happy to take more questions now if you have any. No, that generally means I talked too fast and gave you too much information, which often happens when I talk. Some people may be interested in doing small scale, real estate oriented opportunity zone investments. Right. And it may be a single building or a multiplex or multi-use. It doesn't really matter as long as you meet the rule that whatever you acquire in terms of property, you put at least that much again into its enhancement. Correct. So unfinished or undeveloped or even a major retrofit of a building would all qualify for those. Now, the person who's making the investment might have been wanting to do this anyway, and this acts to amplify the gain that they're going to get because there's no taxes taken out of it. And as I now understand it, they can make the investment today and they do not have to make an exit that would force them to recognize that gain and the benefit of the tax incentive until 2048. Thank you all for coming. What we're trying to do here, as I say, is share information and set the table so that you or your community or your organization can get involved in this in some manner. We ask you to share this information with anybody else who may also have an interest. Thanks, Rick. There will be a conference. There will be more information posted. We expect to see this climb. Hopefully you'll see more and more definitive examples, and as they come into existence and mature, there'll be more certain examples for you to replicate in your own interest. There are all these sources that are here. We'll post all this up on the internet, so the slide deck will go up soon, and then we'll post the video hopefully in a couple days as well. And then you'll see on the open source library an ongoing collection of things as they're happening. So far, there again aren't that many people who are familiar with all the aspects of this, and there may be some things that are still unclear to you, but we'll try to clarify those over time. I hope all of you, got the candidates elected that you voted for, and in case you voted against me, then so what? So thank you for coming.